What up, guys? The Bench Buddies are back with our college football championship week preview and picks. As always, I have Ty joining me to break down this week's games. But before we get into it, hit that subscribe button to be entered into our giveaway. But first, we'll look at the last week of the regular season. Obviously, some big games for a lot of teams, and especially because it's rivalry week. But Ty, which game stood out to you the most?
I don't know if you even have to ask the question there. Michigan pulling off probably their biggest win of their three consecutive wins over Ohio State. This one had a lot more meaning with the sign stealing and everything. I don't know if I'm going to say they completely put everything to bed, but they sure made a big impact in that because, you can't discredit a lot of what they did now after the way they played those three games without Jim Harbaugh.
I'm with you there. And I think for me, I'm going with Clemson and NC State, two ACC teams that aren't getting enough love right now. NC State's playing some really good football, winning five straight. Clemson closing out the year strong. And those teams, when it mattered most, they've won. But we'll move to the first game in the championship. We got Conference USA Championship, New Mexico State, Liberty. Liberty's already beat them once in the year at home. And, well, for these games, they host it at home again. And I'm going with the Flames here to complete the perfect season, 13-0 heading into bowl season.
Yeah, I think New Mexico State's going to cover here. Remember, they went into Auburn 2 weeks ago and actually kind of blew them out. Ended up winning by three touchdowns. I think this will be close, but Liberty, I think, barely remains undefeated.
And quite possibly the biggest game of the weekend, Oregon, Washington. And as you can both see, we're both going with Oregon here. And, I got to give credit to Washington. This team has been undefeated, played games really well, and won when it matters, obviously. But since that Oregon game, the Washington team hasn't looked the same. And same for Oregon. They're a completely different team now. Been blowing out teams in the Pac-12. And Pac-12 has been a tough conference where everyone's beat up on each other except these two teams. And I think Oregon gets the revenge and heads to the playoff.
Yeah, I think Oregon's playing as well as anyone in the country right now, and Washington, they've just been kind of getting by a lot of these games, especially last week in the Apple Cup. And I think the line, a lot of people are going to be surprised by it, but I think it's just about right. I think Oregon is going to be able to have their way in this game, and they'll get their revenge this week.
And then moving over to Saturday, starting today, we got the MAC championship. Miami of Ohio, Toledo. Great game. And I think Toledo's already actually beat Miami of Ohio once this year. I can't remember. But, for once in a while, the two teams in the MAC playing in the MAC championship both have 10 wins. So it's going to be one of the better championships this, century, it feels like. And Toledo, Dorian Finn, he's been the big man on campus the last few years, and I expect him to have a big game in their win.
Yeah, I think Toledo's been far and away the best team in the MAC all year. And I think they'll have no trouble in this game. I think Toledo really establishes themselves as the best program in the MAC moving forward as well with a win this weekend.
And also at 12, Oklahoma State, Texas. And if I'm betting on this one, I'm taking that Oklahoma State spread. It seems like the Big 12 championship the last 3, 4 years. It's always been a close game, no matter the records, because the stakes are higher in this one. And, Oklahoma State, obviously they're playing for the Big 12 championship, but they're also playing to knock Texas out of the college football playoff. And Texas, they're trying to win this one and hope a few things fall their way to get into the playoff. And money line, you got to take Texas here. I think it's kind of the smart bet to do here, but spread, you got to go with Oklahoma State.
Yeah, I could see this game going a lot of different directions. I'm going to go with Texas, but Oklahoma State has had two horrible games this year where they were blown out by South Alabama and UCF. But I know you can't, but if you could take those games away, they're actually a pretty good football team this year, especially with that win over Oklahoma. So I could see them competing or even beating Texas. But I just think you got to roll with Texas the way they're running the ball right now and a lot more on the line for the Longhorns than Oklahoma State Saturday.
Then moving to 3 o'clock, we got the Mountain West Championship, and somehow, some way, Boise State made it there at 7-5, and UNLV has been the clear-cut team in the Mountain West to beat this year. And surprisingly enough, Boise State's favored in this one by 2.5. So I'm going with UNLV, I guess, and technically an upset.
Yeah, UNLV gets a home game here. I think they've been one of the more underrated group of five teams all year. I think they finally prove it and win the Mountain West for the first time since I can remember. I don't know the last time, but it's been a while.
And then at 4, a big game for both these teams. And you can see we're both going with the upset in Bama I'm going with Bama because after last week's performance against Auburn, it always seems like there's one team every year that escapes last week of the season, somehow makes it work, goes into the SEC championship, plays their best game of the year, and upsets someone. And that someone for me is going to be Alabama this year. No knock on Georgia. They've been great all year. But if Bama gets this win, it's kind of hard to imagine Georgia still gets in the playoff over Bama. And if that's the case, then Georgia's going to find themselves probably at number 5 or 6.
Yeah, I'm also going with Alabama. This feels exactly like the SEC championship 2 years ago. The teams had the same records. Alabama barely escaped Auburn with an overtime victory, and then came in and ran Georgia off the field in the SEC championship.
Hmm.
That year, Georgia still got in. This year, I don't know if that's going to happen if Alabama wins. But either way, I'm going with Alabama to finally break that 29 game winning streak from Georgia and maybe knock them out of the playoff.
And in what should be a good game that you should tune into a little bit here while that Bama and Georgia game's on. SMU, Tulane, two teams that have played great football this year. Tulane's only lost to Ole Miss on the road. And if they had an easier SEC opponent like Vandy, they're probably 12-0 here and looking to get into a New Year's Six bowl for the second straight year. But I think they're going to take care of business here, beat a good SMU football team.
Yep, I'm going with Tulane as well. They've followed up their really good season last year with another really great season, right back in the top 25. And I think it's going to come down to them and Liberty if they win this game. But I think Tulane wins this game and gets the nod, and they go to, I think, the Cotton Bowl or some New Year's Six Bowl.
And as well, another good hard-nosed football game, App State, Troy. This is our only game that we're picking different here. I'm going with App State because, there's always a team every conference championship that probably shouldn't be there and somehow gets a win. And for me, that's going to be App State in this one. 8-4 in the Sun Belt this year. Disappointing year for a lot of those Sun Belt teams. And obviously, James Madison can't be in the bowl game, which is stupid because, the new NCAA rules of becoming an FBS team, but they should be in this one playing Troy. And unfortunately, they're not, and App State benefits.
Yeah, I'm going with Troy in this one. I think Troy has probably been maybe the most underrated group of five over the last 5 or 10 years. It seems like every year they're churning out 10 wins, beating some Power Five teams. And I think this year they followed up with another conference championship and continue to put themselves on the map.
And then moving to 8 o'clock, the game obviously we're going to be rooting and cheering for Michigan in. And, what would happen, I guess, the storyline if Michigan were to lose this game, that's going to blow up the whole college football playoff possible rankings heading into next week. But I mean, if you're favored by 22 and you lose, I don't think you deserve to be in. Even coming from a Michigan fan, it's just kind of hard to see that. But I don't think that's going to happen. Harbaugh's back. The team's buzzing after the third straight win against Ohio State. Obviously, losing Zach Zinter, one of their linemen, is a tough blow for them. But against Iowa, I know they have a good defense. They're still going to be able to run the ball and get their way.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of people are worried about the huge high of beating Ohio State, potential letdown for Michigan. But I mean, let's face it, they've beat Ohio State the last 2 years, and that hasn't really been how it's transpired in the Big Ten championship. They've dominated their way twice in a row, and I don't see them having any trouble this year. I mean, it's pretty obvious at this point, but I don't see Iowa moving the ball enough to compete in this game. Just no real weapons on offense for them. So I think Michigan's going to win a low scoring slugfest here.
And then you have quite possibly the biggest question mark team in Florida State. They could possibly go undefeated and somehow, some way not make the college football playoff. It's crazy to me, but it's still a possibility just because, they always put the best teams in. And if they think Washington or a one-loss Georgia is still better than this Florida State team, somehow, some way, Florida State would get screwed in the last year before the 12-team playoff. The 12-team playoff, obviously, they're in. I think Florida State's going to take care of business, get that win, get to 13-0, and I think there's going to be a lot of unhappy people in the country if Florida State somehow doesn't get in at 13-0 and win their conference. So I think they're going to put that to bed here and put a dominant performance here on the line. And they still have all their weapons besides Jordan Travis, and I think they're going to be able to run the ball all over Louisville.
Yeah, I agree. I think this one will be another grinded out game for Florida State like last week. Yeah, but it seems like they kind of found themselves on offense in the second half against Florida, and I think they'll be able to carry that into this week. And I think, it's a win and you're in situation. I don't think there's any way you can leave out an undefeated Power Five, especially one that played LSU in the non-conference.
Mm.
So I think while it's been ugly at times, this is a win and you're in situation for the Seminoles.
And that's going to be it for our championship week preview. Come back in a few weeks when the bowl games all start up again, and we'll be breaking down each bowl game and who we're picking in those. But until next time, the Bench Buddies are out.